Good day everyone! Maayong buntag sa tanan. I hope you are doing okay and happy. Good day to our admirable and sharp-witted instructor, Miss Annalyn Dahunan, and I am Guadalupe Bibrugos Jr., accompanied by Miss Jonna Buscabos and Erin Bugahod as the second reporter with the assigned topic of appropriateness and alignment of assessment methods to learning outcomes. So without further ado, the discussion begins. To formally start our discussion, let's have our learning objectives. Determine the different levels, processes, and action verbs that may use for the different taxonomy of learning domain. Examine the different types of assessment methods. Identify terms related to appropriateness and alignment of assessment methods to learning outcomes. And the last one, analyze basic concept, principles, and procedures in identifying learning outcomes, taxonomy of learning domains, and learning target and assessment methods. And now, let's identify learning outcomes. And learning outcomes pertains to a particular level of knowledge, skills, and values that a student has acquired at the end of a unit period of study as a result of his or her engagement in a set of appropriate and meaningful learning experiences. Organized set of learning outcomes help teachers plan and deliver appropriate outcomes, appropriate instruction, and design valid assessment tasks and strategies. Anderson 2005 listed 4 steps or cycle in a student outcome. Please refer to the given example of cycle below. So there are 4 steps in assessment cycle. We have create learning outcome statements, design teaching, assessment to achieve these outcome statements, implement teachings, assessment activities, and analyze data on individual and aggregate level. Step 1, which is to create learning outcome statements. So these are the learning outcomes that describes or creates students that what should be able to do, abilities, to know knowledge, cognitive, and to appreciate as well as a certain unit. So next steps is to design teaching assessment to achieve those outcome statement. So these are the teaching strategies or design of our teaching which assess to the level of performance for our student. Now this may be recommended to focus on direct measures of learning or by using any rubrics. So third step is to implement teaching or give assessment activities in classroom setting, and after period we should implement and give assessment activities to measure students' learning progress or performances. This step is a critical assessment process which if the assessment process has failed, then there's no learning happened. Last step is to analyze data on individual and aggregate level. So it is important to analyze and report the result of the assessment in a meaningful way. And now we will dig into the taxonomy of learning domains. So learning outcomes are statements of performance expectations. Cognitive, affective, and psychomotor are the 3 broad domains of learning characterized by change in a learner's behavior. In taxonomy of learning domains, each domains are levels of expertise that drives the assessment. These levels are listed in order of increasing complexity. In addition, higher levels require more sophisticated methods of the assessment, but they facilitate retention and transfer of learning. All learning outcomes must be capable of being assessed and measured, and this may be done using direct and indirect assessment techniques. And now let's talk about one of the taxonomy of learning domains, which is the cognitive knowledge-based. It involves the development of knowledge and students' intellectual skills, and also it is designed to help teachers and implement a standard-based curriculum. It answers the questions, what do I want learners to know? So this is the newer version, which is spearheaded by one of Bloom's former student Anderson and Bloom's original partner, Mr. Anderson. The new version step changed to verbs. For example, remembering the lowest function, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and the last highest function, which is the creating. So GROUP-2 2002 stressed out that our revised Bloom's taxonomy table is not only used to classify instructional and learning activities used to achieve the objectives, but also for assessment employed to determine how well learners have attained and masters the objectives. Marzano and Kendall of 2007 came up with their own taxonomy composed of three systems, which are the self system, the metacognitive system, and the cognitive system, and along with the knowledge of domains. So the cognitive system has four levels, which are the knowledge, comprehension, analysis, and knowledge utilization. So this is the new version of Bloom's revised content. This table might be utilized. We can see the levels, processes, and action verbs, and sample learning competencies in the upper portion of the table. Like for example, remembering for the level, it is retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory. We have the process, which is still recognizing and recalling. We have action verbs that we may use into remembering. We have recognizing, recalling, action verbs, define, describe, identify, level, list, match, name, outline, reproduce, and select state. We have also example for sample learning competencies in remembering, which is to define the four levels of mental processes in Marzano and Kendall's cognitive system, and then follows. So next domain is the psychomotor or the skill base. It focuses on physical and mechanical skills involving coordination of the brain and the muscular activity. And this domain answers the questions, what actions do I want learners to be able to perform? Dave, 1970s, identified 5 levels of behavior in the psychomotor domain, which are the limitation, the manipulation, the precision, the articulation, and the naturalization. Also, Sampson on 1972 laid down 7 progressive levels, namely the perception, set, guided response, mechanism, complex overt response, adaptation, and the organization. And another one, Harrow, on the same year, developed her own taxonomy with 6 categories organized accordingly to the degree of coordination. Firstly, the reflex movements, the basic fundamental movements, the perceptual physical activities, the skill movements, and the non-discursive communication. So, okay, this is the example version for psychomotor domain. It is the same one in the cognitive domain. We can see level, action verbs describing the learning outcomes, and sample determining competencies. Like for example, for the observing level, it is an active mental attending of a physical event. Verbs used in the level now, which we have described: detect, distinguish, differentiate, relate, select. And the sample learning competencies is to relate music to a particular dance step and then follows. Okay, so for the last domain, which is the affective domain, it is values, attitude, and interest, and it emphasizes the emotional knowledge, and it tackles the questions: what actions do I want learners to think or care about? So kindly prefer for the example table in the affective domain. We can see level, action verbs describing learning outcomes, and sample competencies. In the upper portion of the table, it is the same on the two domains, which is the cognitive and the psychomotor. Like for example, for the level, we have receiving. When we say receiving, it is being aware of attending to something in the environment. And for the action verbs, we have ask, choose, described, follow, give, and etc. And for the sample competencies of that level is to listen attentively to valuable introduction and then follows.
Types of assessment methods. Assessment methods can be categorized according to the nature and characteristics of each method. Macmillan in 2007 identified four major categories, which is the selected response format, constructed response format, teacher observation, and student self-assessment. So first is the selected response format. Selected response tasks are those that are composed of questions to which there is typically one correct answer. It is an assessment that includes options such as multiple choice, matching type, and true or false question. Multiple choice consists of a stem, question, or statement with several answer choices or distractors, while matching type consists of a set of column of description, words, phrases, or images, while the true or false questions is a binary choice type, but the reliability of the true or false items is not generally high because of the possibility of guessing. Teachers here in selected response format commonly assess students using questions and items that are multiple choice. That is why students select from given set of options to answer a question or a problem. Most of the selected response questions measure student knowledge, comprehension, and application. The licensure examination for teachers is an example of a selected response assessment. So second is the constructed response format. It is a response that you construct. You build it with the information you're given in the text. Constructed response questions are assessment that ask students to apply knowledge, skills, and critical thinking abilities to real-world standards-driven performance tasks. It is meant to promote high-quality student assignments that develop reading, writing, and thinking skills. It demands that students should create or produce their own answers in response to a question, problem, or a task. Constructed response formats, sometimes called open response items, because There is often more than one way to correctly answer the question, and they require students to construct or develop their own answers without the benefit of any suggestions or choices. In this type, items may fall under any of the following categories. First is the brief constructed response items. Second is the performance task. Third is AC items, and for oral questioning. Brief constructed response items. It only requires short responses from the students. An example include sentence completion, where students fill in the blank at the end of the statement. Short answer to open-ended questions, labeling a diagram, or answering a mathematics problem by showing their solution. So for performance assessment is that performance tasks are called authentic or alternative assessment because it is an approach to educational assessment that requires students to directly demonstrate what they know and are able to do through open-ended tasks such as constructing an answer, producing a project, or performing an activity. Compared to other assessment methods, they may provide a more reliable indications of students' knowledge and skills. Students here have the chance to use their knowledge and abilities in practical situations through performance activities. This implies that students must produce or create proof of their learning and act and exhibit their skills. According to Crehan in 1991, that performance assessment can result to better integration of assessment with instruction, greater focus on higher order thinking skills, increased motivation level in the learning process, and improved instructional and content validity. Essay assessments. It involves answering a question or proposition in written form. An essay item that requires a few sentences is called restricted response. There are constraints to the content and nature of the responses, and questions have a clearer focus. Essay questions must be straightforward so that students can swiftly arrange their thoughts and directly respond to the questions. Essays are graded using a rubric. This type of assessment is very powerful because it allows the students to express themselves and demonstrate their reasoning related to a topic. It may appear to be easier to write than multiple choice in the other question types, but writing essay questions requires a great deal of thought and planning. Also, essay questions often demand the use of higher level thinking skills such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation.
So the next one is the oral questioning. No, it is a common assessment method during instructions to check on student understanding. Okay, so basically this oral questioning is the most exciting part of the student and as well as the teacher, because as a student we are able to strengthen our confidence in our ideas, our understanding, our insight, perspective into a specific questions. At the same time, for the teacher, in order them to see our progress and level of performance by asking questions that will help us to be more productive, and in a way of a scoring system, we are able to give a good feedback and eager to give a satisfaction answer.
Teacher observations. Teacher observation is a form of ongoing assessment, usually done in combination with oral questioning. To check on the student's understanding, teacher should regularly observe and take anecdotal notes. By watching how students respond to oral questions and behave during individual and collaborative activities, the teacher can get information if learning is taking place in the classroom. Teachers must keep an eye out for students who are acting inappropriately, losing focus, or to those who don't seem to be participating in class activities. And making observational or anecdotal notes how students learn in terms of concept development, problem solving, communication skills, or etc. may be helpful or beneficial for teachers.
4. Student self-assessment. Self-assessment is one of the standards of quality assessment identified by GROUP-2 and Stagent year 2009. It is a process where the students are given a chance to reflect and rate their own work and judge how well they have performed in relation to a set of assessment criteria. Students track and evaluate their own progress or performance. There are self-monitoring techniques like activity checklists, diaries, and self-report inventories. The latter are questionnaires or surveys that students fill out to reveal their attitudes and beliefs about themselves and others. Example of self-student, students are given to reflect and rate their own and judge how they perform. So, nag-chance ang student nga siya mo rate sa iyang kagalingon kung unsa iyang performance. So, self-monitoring techniques are example are activity checklists, self-report inventories, questionnaire surveys which reveal student attitudes and beliefs about themselves and others. Matching learning targets with assessment method. First is a learning target is a description of performance that includes what learners should know and be able to do. So for example, ani sa table is like sa score niya sa kanang senior and kuan is 2. Unya sa performance 4. Unya sa observation 4. So ang iyang target ani is target niya sa usa ka student nga ma-obtain niya nga kung dagko ang score niya sa essay mapareha ra tanan ingana ang iyang target. Second is 8 contents the criteria used to judge student performance. The third is in an outcome-based approach, teaching method and resources that are used to support learning as well as assessment tasks and rubrics are implicitly linked to the program and course learning outcomes. So based sa ilang rubrics nga gipakita, adto mailan nato kung unsay pamaagi sa pagtudlo sa maestra kung asa nga part adto ang unsay di kay nila nasabtan or unsay wag nasabtan nila pag-ayo. The fourth is Biggs and Tang, year 2007, called this constructive alignment. So, matod pa ni Biggs and Tang pag year 2007, na siya gitawag og constructive alignment. So, the fifth is constructive alignment provides how to or verifying that the teaching learning activities or TILAs and the assessment tasks activate the same verbs as in the ELOs. Last is matching the assessment method with the learning outcomes requires an examination of the evidences of learning needed and target levels of knowledge, understanding, reasoning skills, product performance, and effect as manifested in the learning targets. So example ani is katong sa table. Knowledge and simple understanding, senior and create high siya. Sa essay is 4 yung score, then performance task is 3. And sa uban is 3 or 4, mo na. So mo ni ang target nila nga ma-obtain sa usa ka student sa ilang assessment method score.
So that will be all for our topic, appropriateness and alignment of assessment methods to learning outcomes. I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching. Stay safe and God bless us all. Thank you.